You know that feeling, right? Where you just keep wondering why your job feels so much harder than it used to. Doesn't matter what your title is or the industry, you're organized, you've done all the time management stuff, you're working flat out.
Yeah.
But you still feel like you're just constantly running to stand still. It never lets up.
You are definitely not imagining it. And that feeling, that sort of universal sense of strain, that's what we're digging into in this deep dive.
Okay.
The core idea we pulled from the sources is this. The difficulty you're feeling, it's systemic. It's not you.
Right, not a personal failing.
Exactly. The demands on basically all professionals have fundamentally shifted. But the support structures around that work, the time, the resources, the management thing, they just haven't caught up.
And that gap, that failure of the structure to adapt, that's what we're exploring today.
Precisely.
Our mission here is to really analyze why burnout seems rooted in what our sources are calling the leadership crisis nobody talks about. We want to move past that idea that you can just, meditate your way out of this or find a better planner. The problem seems foundational.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we need to start by defining what this fundamental change actually looks like on the ground.
Good point.
Because it's easy to just say demands are higher, but that's too abstract, isn't it?
It is.
The sources stress that this crisis is universal. It's not just tech or healthcare or whatever. It means the burden has shifted across the board.
So if you think back over, say, the last decade, we were kind of promised all this radical efficiency with technology.
We were.
But instead, it feels like we got radical complexity.
Yeah.
What does that actually mean, though, in practice? It can't just be, like, more emails, surely.
Well, it is more emails, but it's also far more insidious than just volume.
Okay.
The actual nature of professional work seems to have shifted. It used to be more, let's say, siloed, project-based.
Right, you had your tasks.
Exactly. Now, it's shifted towards this constant, matrixed, fragmented communication. Think about it, Slack, Teams, Asana, whatever project management tool.
Oh yeah, constant notifications.
Right, all demanding immediate context switching. So, your job maybe used to be defined by a set of core tasks you needed to complete. Now it feels like your job is defined by constantly managing multiple simultaneous communication streams while also trying to execute those original tasks.
Ah, that's a really key distinction. So the job description on paper might look the same.
Often does.
But the way you have to execute it has completely transformed. It demands this continuous high-speed responsiveness. We've shifted from deep work to, well, perpetually available shallow work.
That's a great way to put it. Perpetually available, shallow work. Precisely.
Wow.
And this systemic increase in required output, the complexity, the speed, the constant switching, it seems to have happened across pretty much all professional roles.
So it's not just a slight uptick in workload.
No, it's more like a total remodeling of the professional environment itself, a fundamental change, like the sources say.
Okay, let's unpack this then. If the complexity and the output expectations shifted so drastically, but the time allocated, the resources provided, they basically stayed static.
Yeah.
Well, then the system itself is kind of creating a failure condition, isn't it?
It is.
So where did the systems actually fail to adapt? What broke?
Well, the failure seems to be mainly in two areas: boundary setting and resource allocation.
Okay.
The direct consequence of these fundamentally changed demands is the creation of what we really have to call unsustainable expectations.
Unsustainable expectations.
I like
that framing.
And leaders, often without even realizing it, they set these expectations because they fail to shield their teams from this flood of digital demand.
Yeah, that framing really resonates because it immediately shifts the root cause away from the individual.
Right.
If the system demands infinite availability and output from a finite human being, well, the individual isn't failing the expectation. The expectation itself is flawed. It's failing the individual.
Absolutely. And the structural definition of this systemic problem boils down to this: the support systems needed for this new reality.
You mean like management training, prepper staffing?
Exactly. Management training, enforced downtime, appropriate staffing ratios, clear boundaries. They simply haven't caught up.
So we're running a 2024 workload.
Using basically a 2010 support infrastructure.
Yeah.
And that gap, that's the mechanical cause of this chronic structural burnout we're seeing.
So if you, the listener, are feeling that exhaustion, the chronic stress, it's not because you lack resilience or you're inefficient.
No.
It's because the structure around you, the system you work within, isn't actually designed for the kind of work you're now required to do.
That's it, exactly. When expectations become unsustainable because of the structural failure, the result is burnout.
And it feels personal.
Of course it does, because you are the one experiencing the physical and emotional exhaustion. But the sources really confirm this is a direct result of, well, poor structural design.
And maybe a failure of leadership to modernize the system.
A failure of leadership to adapt the system to reflect these very modern demands, yes.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. Because this isn't just, an anecdotal observation based on workplace trends.
Right.
This is actually backed up by some serious academic validation, isn't it? This structural crisis is something researchers have identified in workplace psychology.
That's vital. It grounds the whole conversation. We can bring in the work of Dr. Michael Leiter here. He's a really foundational voice in workplace psychology. And his insights help us move past just complaining, and actually define burnout structurally based on research.
So tell us a bit more about Leiter's framework. How does his research connect that psychological experience of burnout to the actual environment, the structure?
Well, Leiter's core idea, and it's powerful, is that burnout isn't primarily about the individual running out of steam.
Okay.
It's a crisis that arises from a mismatch between the professional and their work environment, specifically across 6 key areas of work life.
6 areas.
Yes, but for this deep dive, focusing on the structural failures, 3 of those mismatches really stand out as being caused by this failure to adapt we've been discussing.
Okay, what are those 3 key mismatches that really define this systemic failure?
So first, there's the workload mismatch. That one's pretty obvious, just too much work for the available time and resources. We've covered that.
Right, standard overload.
Standard overload. But second, and maybe even more crucial today, is the control mismatch.
Control?
Yeah. As work became more fragmented, more digitized, professionals often lost autonomy. They lost control over how and when they complete their complex tasks.
Because they're constantly reacting.
Exactly. Constantly reacting to pings, notifications, urgent requests, rather than proactively managing their schedule and focusing. And that lack of control dramatically increases stress, regardless of the total hours worked.
That ties straight back to the context switching we talked about earlier. If I'm constantly jumping because of a Slack notification, I've lost control over my deep work time, even if I typically have it blocked out on my calendar.
Absolutely. The calendar block becomes meaningless if the culture doesn't respect it.
Right.
And then the third crucial area Leiter identifies is the fairness mismatch.
Fairness.
Right.
How's that play in?
Well, think about it. When demands are unclear, when resources feel insufficient, when the rules of engagement like, are you expected to answer emails at 9 p.m. are constantly shifting or unevenly enforced.
Yeah, that creates uncertainty.
It creates a profound sense of unfairness. And that loss of control, combined with that perception of unfairness, those are structural markers of a toxic or at least highly dysfunctional environment. It's far more significant than any individual's supposed lack of motivation.
So, Leiter's model basically gives us the clinical evidence. It shows the problem is rooted in the environment's capacity or lack thereof.
Yes.
It proves this isn't just, whining or complaining. It's a verifiable structural breakdown that leads to real psychological harm.
Precisely. And if the psychological framework itself points to the mismatch between the person and the environment as the source of the crisis,
then the solution can't just be fixing the person.
Exactly. The logical conclusion is that any effective intervention can't just focus on making the individual more resilient. It absolutely must focus on fixing the environment, fixing the structure.
Which brings us, I guess, to the inevitable question. If the system is broken, what does this actually mean for solving the problem? If you're feeling burned out today, what's the immediate implication for how you should think about finding relief?
Well, the implication is direct, and honestly, it can be a bit challenging to hear.
Okay.
It's that individual solutions simply aren't enough for systemic problems. They just aren't.
So all the wellness programs.
Look, we see companies offering mindfulness apps, wellness seminars, maybe time management coaching, and those tools might help an individual cope a little, temporarily.
Sure, they might take the edge off.
They might. But if the underlying operational structure, the thing that's fundamentally creating the crisis, remains unchanged, if the expectations around availability and complexity are still there,
then those individual efforts just become another thing to manage, Another task on the to-do list.
Exactly. It becomes another burden. You're essentially prescribing painkillers when the patient actually needs major surgery.
It addresses the symptom, not the root cause.
Precisely. So if we want real lasting relief, the focus has to shift. We must build structural solutions.
Okay, give me an example. What does a structural solution look like in practice?
Okay, so instead of teaching individuals to be, say, better at time management,
Right.
a structural solution might involve leadership enforcing mandatory protected blocks of focus time across the team or the entire organization.
Where interruptions are actively discouraged.
Actively discouraged, yes. Or establishing really explicit, universally applied policies against non-critical communication outside of defined work hours and sticking to them.
Ah, okay. So by building those kinds of structural boundaries, you'd be fundamentally reducing the workload mismatch and restoring some of the control that Leiter identified as missing.
Exactly. It's systemic change, not just asking individuals to change their behavior within a broken system.
It shifts the responsibility.
It shifts the responsibility for maintaining professional health and sustainable working conditions back to the system, back to leadership, which is arguably where it belongs.
Instead of placing the entire burden of adapting to an unsustainable environment onto the individual professional.
Yes, the analysis really confirms this. It's a structural problem affecting professionals pretty much everywhere. It is not a personal failing or a failure of character.
Wow. That is such a powerful and honestly probably quite validating takeaway for many people listening.
I hope so.
That feeling of difficulty at work, it is validated by this structural analysis. It proves it's a widespread systemic issue, likely stemming from a leadership crisis where support systems just didn't evolve with the demands. So maybe it's time to stop looking only inward for the source of the problem and start looking outward, start demanding changes to the structure that surrounds you.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, maybe challenge you, the listener, to think structurally for a moment.
Okay.
We talked a lot about complexity and availability as drivers, but think about this. What specific feature of modern work, something we haven't explicitly discussed but is implied, might be the single greatest structural change that support systems failed to address?
Okay, a specific feature.
Consider the rise of continuous measurement and the tracking of performance data. Think about how performance metrics themselves might have shifted, maybe away from focusing solely on the quality and output of the actual work,
Towards measuring more superficial things.
perhaps towards measuring things like superficial connectivity or immediate responsiveness, things that are easier to track digitally.
Right, rewarding busyness over effectiveness.
Potentially. So the provocation is, consider what kind of structural solution could redefine workplace success in a way that genuinely rewards deep, valuable work over just surface-level activity and constant availability.
That is definitely something to mull over, thinking about how the structures in your own professional life measure and reward work. A fascinating thought to end on. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
My pleasure. Till next time.